that was the principle that the rabbis worked with, that it was traditional to give a daughter a half of what all of the brothers are getting. But then we saw that he said that if there's going to be an issue of shalom bayis, you can give her even more. Okay. So he says, right, that's what the last paragraph that we saw, that if you see that there's a reason to quell any machlokes, you can apportion your estate any way that you like. Okay, now we're up to Daled. V'hinei bi'ikar davar. And we talked about Sfarim and Karkos. We talked about books and real estate, ancestral real estate as well. Okay. V'hinei bi'ikar davar zeh shekasavnu b'tchilas os beis debabas leka mishum ivori achsanta. He says what we've suggested, that when it comes to a daughter, there is not at all a halachic problem of depriving your sons from inheritance by giving it to a daughter as well. Yesh la'ayin im hadin kein be'isha hakoseves tzava'a. Does the same apply when a woman writes a will? V'hu lefi ma shehuva berama be'evan ha'ezer simin kuf yud gimel plukta derab vasa betakanta de'isr nechasim leparnasus nedunya labas. He says there's a discussion there if, this accommodation that the rabbis made to give 10% of one's estate to his daughters to marry them off, their dowry, im noheges benichsei ha'em. Does that apply when a woman is a testator as well? Should she also leave over 10% of her estate for her daughter's dowry? Because Sham hagra ve'havne miluim lahochiach kedasa maharil hamubasham, the leka benichsei ha'em takanta de isser nechasim misugi de ksuvos, the kasli la laha de isser nechasim bikra de kchu livnechem nashim ve'esbenosechem, or sorry, de katali la laha de isser nechasim bikra de kchu livnechem nashim ve'esbenosechem tenu la'anoshim. He says these poskim suggest that this was only an accommodation that was made for when men are leaving over their estate. It's based on a pasuk of where it says, "Khu livnechem nashim," take for your sons daughters, and give your daughters as wives to other men. Dinil b'shav v'nichaseh v'neisev la midi ki heichi dekafzi Allah. So that they can be clothed and covered. And the Gemara explains that the reason why you want to make sure that your daughters have a dowry is so that men will be eager to marry them. He says, we know from the Gemara that the mitzvah to marry off your children is specifically a father's mitzvah, not a mother's mitzvah. Shehi Kidamru b'Kiddushin. It's the Mishnah in Maseches Kiddushin that gives a series of things that a father has to do for his son, and it says that he's got to marry him off. In other words, that's one of a father's duties to a son, but it's not a mother's duty. He says, "Af sefer dekra de esbenosechem tenu la'anoshim duhu mitzvah lahasiyas habas avigam rak halav v'lo alayim." And the same thing is true with marrying off a daughter. That mitzvah, that halacha, that the rabbis say you have to marry off your children, is incumbent upon the father. Memela deleka benichsei ha'em takanta de'isr nechasim u'chedas ha'maharil ad kan tochen divrei hagra avnei miluim. He says, so what the Gra and Avnei Miluim essentially point out is that there is no mitzvah for a woman who's a testator to leave any money for her daughters, because the whole reason for leaving money for your daughters would be to enable them to more easily find husbands when the men know that they have a dowry waiting for them if they marry this girl. Again, this is all very foreign to us, right? Because this is not how the world runs anymore. Umehashta afan anomi nema de le'inyan nichse ha'em ein din habas cholok mishar bilti yorshim le'inyan avurei achsanta. And therefore, when a woman is a testator, there would be no difference between her daughter and any other person that is not a rightful heir, and it would be the similar issue. It's really a moral or ethical issue as far as depriving the rightful heirs of their inheritance. The chol ikar hachiluk mishum da amr rabban lameyav la min achasav ki heichi delikvitzu Allah inshi laminsaba v'chemoshe kasafti ba'os beis mitzvah suvas. He says the whole reason why the rabbis made a special provision for daughters is so that they would be able to get married more easily. And that's the reason why they said, give her 10% of your estate for dowry, etc. And or you can write a chatzi zachar promissory note and make sure that she has provisions. And therefore, whatever considerations that might exist for taking away your estate from your heirs and giving it to other people would apply to daughters as well if the testator is a woman and not a man. Okay. And he says the Sefer Nachal HaShiva, which is written, I believe, sometime in the 18th or 19th century, he says, I think it's 19th century, he says, the Maisi Chiluk Minhagim Bein Pulin La Ashkenaz. He brings a difference in custom between Poland and Germany. The Bepulin Lonot, which is basically Eastern and Western Europe. In Western Europe, they were more progressive and more cognizant of the needs of a female, right, to take care of her. He says, the Bepulin Lonagu B'tziva Shtar Chatzi Zarcha B'nichse Eim Hakala, Uva Ashkenaz Nahug B'shtar Chatzi Zachar Af B'nichse Ha'em. He says, in Poland, they would not make a provision of the ksuvas chatzi zachar when the woman is the testator, for the mother of the bride. And in Ashkenaz, they did. In other words, what they used to do is they used to make a provision that when a girl got married, she would be included in the will using the chatzi zachar mechanism that we've talked about before, the promissory note. And they did that in Germany, but in Poland, they didn't. Well, so you see that differences in different community standards has always been an issue. He says, based on what we've just mentioned, that a mother has no obligation to marry off her daughter and make sure that she has a financial dowry to provide. He says that would explain why in Poland they didn't compel the mother to do this. He says, and there's going to be an issue of passing over, taking away inheritance from the heirs and giving it over to a perfect stranger. And the daughter in this case would qualify as a perfect stranger in the same way that anyone else would. Uvetam minag medinas Ashkenazi kalamemer despir lukadasa poskim shanavi bosvav the lekamishumi boriach santa kol sheino misalek liorish lagamri. But so how do we defend the custom in Germany? We're going to see very shortly that there are many poskim who are of the opinion that you can leave your estate to whomever you like, as long as you leave some of your estate to your heirs. And we're gonna see that momentarily. So, in other words, we're going through this exercise, but we're going to end up in the right place, is basically what I want to tell you. That it is, you worked your whole life to build a nest egg, to build an estate, okay? And there's an assumption that is being made by a certain number of Jewish authorities that your kids are entitled to that. Well, who said? Did they work? No. They've been on the take all the time that you've been working for this, right? So the Torah clearly does feel that an heir is entitled to something from his ancestors. The question is, and we've taken it as a given because we understand that there's a law of nachala, there's a law of inheritance that's indicated in the Torah in a number of places, right? But to what extent should a testator feel obligated to leave his children the farm and everything that's on the farm? And to what extent, what if I want to give it to my favorite charity? What if I want to leave it for widows and orphans? I know my kids are going to be well taken care of because I set them up. I paid millions of dollars to send them through university and give them a good education. So why should I worry about them after I'm gone? Let them take care of themselves. But there are plenty of people out in society that didn't have the privilege that my children had. Why don't I leave them some of my estate? Right? Or some other argument that a person can make. So we're going to see that momentarily. But I just want to let you know we're going to get to that destination. But first we have to work within a mindset that says that your heirs are the rightful owners of your estate after you die, and how dare you take anything away from them. Okay, so that's what we're working with now. Then we're gonna shift slowly over to the other side. Yeah. Yeah, right. It's a great question. Well, making sure that there's no machlokes starts long before the testator dies. It probably starts about 50 years before the testator dies. Yeah, well, just after the kids are born, you know. It's a serious issue because I know of family dynamics where there's nothing that a person can do in his will to avoid family conflict, right? Why? Because the kids have disliked each other from the time that they're young, right? And the parents have not done anything to foster any kind of family unity. And if anything, they've created strife and jealousy among the kids, you know, for years, right? And so, and also the parents have never, look, we learned the story of Yosef, and we learned that because Yaakov gave a few extra shekels for a nice fabric, we ended up as slaves in Egypt, right? And that's something that we have to talk. We talked about that, was it a couple of days ago? We have to think about that when we raise our children, and also when we deal with our adult children, to make sure that we try our best not to arouse jealousy among our children. So now, if a person has done that and the children have a healthy family relationship with each other, right? Obviously, there are going to be some siblings who are closer to each other than others. That's true in every family, right? So the question now is, what should a parent do to avoid disputes, to avoid machloikes? And the answer is that it depends on the family situation. But most likely, it's to avoid strife. You want to try and be as equitable as you can, be as fair as you can in the division of your estate, so that one person is not getting a hugely larger amount, disproportionate amount. I didn't use the word disproportionate because sometimes I think that being disproportionate might be fair in any given situation. Let's say you have multiple adult children. One adult child has never gotten married and is independently wealthy, and another one of your children has like 8 kids and has been constantly struggling their entire life. So disproportionate, yes. Fair, also yes. In other words, there's always going to be different calculuses that you need to make in order to try and make sure that you're doing right by your kids, and at the same time not going to be creating machloikas at the end. There's always going to be bad feelings at some point or another. Let's say which child is chosen as power of attorney, right? Invariably, that's going to cause bad feelings. because let's say your oldest child you feel is not up for the job. And sometimes a child would not want power of attorney, and you assign them as well and make them the executor of the estate. And they think, oh my gosh, now I have a headache on my hands and everyone's going to sue me and all that. And yeah. Well, you could also sit your kids down and say, we're making Timmy the executor of the estate. Well, yeah, I mean, usually you do have the opportunity if you plan ahead. Yeah, you say, Liz, you can sit the kids down and you can say, we're making Timmy the executor. He has the most, let's say, legal knowledge, and he's right for the job. And even though he's not the firstborn, Mommy and I have chosen him because X, Y, and Z, right? Okay. And you see, they know what's coming, they know what's down the road, and that's it. Or you may feel that that's going to itself cause more machlokas in your lifetime. And then you could decide not to say anything until they open the will. Yeah. So if it's something that you can work on, it might make sense to do it before you go and sit the kids down. Listen, Pesach might be the right time to do it. not at the Seder, but maybe during Chol Hamoed. Put down that fork, right? Okay. Yeah. All right. All right. Okay. So this is an important conversation, and it's something that really sort of should be on everyone's mind, when you make your will. He says, Omnam gam bazeh heicha yesh eze tzorach miyuchad bekach, yesh latet labat chelak af benichsei ha'em, sheis lismoch bazeh laposkim shuzgeru b'samach delek mishum yivoriach santa, kol shemeshayar chelak gam liyorei shuchamoshe kasafti bozvav. And therefore, even a woman testator, right? Let's say a widow who has an estate and she's making her will, should make sure that she leaves for her daughter as well. And even though there are some poskim who say that there's no reason to, nonetheless, as we'll see, a person can apportion their estate to whomever they like, as long as they leave something for their heirs, as we'll explain shortly. Va'ayin benachal shiva sham shekasav, da'ab shenagu b'shtar chatzi zachar l'shar sfarim v'karkos lebein. And Sefer Nachal Shiva further writes that even though the minhag is to leave real estate and books to the sons, ani mili b'nichsei ha'av, aval b'nichsei ha'em ein tzarich l'shayrim levein. But that's only for the father's estate. For the mother's estate, there's no compelling reason why that should be left only to the son and not the daughter. And the argument is that if the mother is in possession of ancestral real estate or books from the mishpacha, that means that it's already passed from the male, from the patriarchy to a daughter, so it's already passed to a different family, because we view the family as defined by the male leader of the family. And so if a daughter has inherited all of her family's estate, so it's already passed over and now it's in her husband's name anyway. So it's no longer considered to be connected to the, let's say her name was Bernstein and her husband's name was Cohen, right? It's already passed from the Bernstein family to the Cohen family. But you're not doing anything wrong by leaving some of that stuff to your daughter, because it's already left the Bernstein family to, when it came to her. The imtehe nises pam shnia, Inosenes osen leisha acher lenedunya ayin sham. And if, let's say, this woman were to choose to remarry, all of her estate would get passed over to her husband anyway. So what's wrong with leaving some of it for your daughter? Va'azl sham l'shita, so the time of the shir sfarm ve'karkos mishum de'ika b'hu agmas nefesh tuva im yasovu levesav acher al yedei yerusha sabas u'chmo shevenu mishmo ba'oz gimel. And this is consistent with what the Nachla Shiva had told us before, that the reason why you should not leave ancestral real estate and books to your daughter is because that causes anguish to the Bernstein family, right? That a big chunk of their estate has left the family. But he says, but if it's already left the family because this woman has inherited it, so then there's no longer any reason to avoid that anguish. V'hinei hevenu od sham ta'amim acherim machsam sofer b'shir zedek karkos usfarim d'le'inyan karkos havitayma mishum deker yerusha d'chsiva lahedja b'torah b'karkosu d'chsiva. But if you recall, we mentioned in the name of the Chasam Sofer that there's another reason why it's considered preferable not to transfer real estate and books over to one's daughter. The Chasam Sofer says that when it comes to real estate, it's because you shouldn't take something that is the most real part of the estate and take it away from the rightful heirs. V'lo ratzu lakor Yerusha d'chsiv lahedja kan dvarav. He says, but that argument also is not a good argument to prevent a woman testator from leaving real estate to her daughters. The Seder Nachlos d'chsiv lahedja be'oraisu b'nechsei ha'av. He says, because the only idea of a hierarchy of inheritance is only mentioned in reference to a father's estate, a man's estate, as it says in Parshas Pinchas, Ish ki yamus. Aval Yerusha sabein v'habas b'nichsei ha'em nilmad midrasha dekroi kimavur b'kulei sugi de Baba Basra. But he says, but we learn out that a woman leaves over her estate to her children from a different pasuk. Baram taima di'oib shamachsam sofer le'inyan svarim dehu mishum debanim aski b'terval benos lo mifkidi al talmud Torah l'chora shayach gam b'nichsei ha'em. He says, so therefore, in other words, this hierarchical argument that real estate should be left to the sons because they're the main heirs, that really doesn't apply to a woman's estate, because the psukim that are mentioned for a woman's estate do not make any mention of real estate as the primary asset. And so therefore, that's not a good argument to compel a woman to leave her real estate to her sons and not to her daughters. But the argument that the Chasam Sofer gives as to why you should leave the family books to your sons and not your daughters does apply. And he says it's because the daughters have no mitzvah of Talmud Torah. So why leave them books when, leave them the Sfarim when the sons are the ones who have an obligation to learn from them? So again, something that would be arguable in today's day and age. Amnam habalav hachi einir lahatir la'avuri achsanta labas b'nichsei ha'em ela kishroa eizin echitzos bekach. He says, but all of that notwithstanding, he says it would seem that it would not be proper to take away some of the heirs, the rightful heirs' estate, by giving it to the daughter, unless there's a compelling reason, as we mentioned before. And when there's a compelling reason, and you want to leave real estate and svarim as well to your daughter, then you can do that as well. That a daughter should receive a portion in the entire estate. As I mentioned above, that when you want to avoid strife, you want to avoid machloikes, so then you can do anything to mollify your daughter. And if, let's say, she says, Daddy left over a huge Judaica library, and I would like to be able to learn from those farm and leave them for my sons, then, and she's going to feel deprived if she doesn't have a portion in that, then that is sufficient reason to be able to leave her some of the ancestral real estate and the ancestral svarim. He says, as we'll see, and when we get to Sivav, as long as you leave some of your estate to your heirs, you can certainly leave whatever you want to your daughters. And based on that, he was deliberating over whether it's appropriate to leave the real estate and the books to your sons only, or whether you can also argue to leave it to your daughters as well. The bottom line is that there's no difference between a man's estate and a woman's estate. Just like as in a man's estate, you can make the argument that to avoid machlokes, you can leave a portion of real estate and svarim for your daughter. You can make the same argument when it comes to a woman's estate. Okay, so that brings us up to Sif Hey, and we'll continue Be'ezrat Hashem tomorrow. Sorry for starting a little bit late, and we'll continue, God willing, tomorrow. Okay. Oh, that's right. Tomorrow is Rosh Chodesh, so we'll only be learning for about 15 minutes tomorrow. Okay, thank you for reminding us. Yeah. Okay, have a great day, everybody.